and we just want to over-invest in design. There's a delight that comes from using a thing where people just went kind of way too far.
Yeah, Shopify is over 10% of US commerce.
Yeah, it's like, that's a lot.
That's insane.
Yes, like I think people are going to be on spaceships to Alpha Centauri and will have to still dismiss cookie banners on websites.
I was sure I was getting fired.
That is not where I thought this would go.
Context has been Shopify's internal podcast for over 10 years, and now we're bringing it to you. It's where leaders across our business talk about what they're building, why it matters for commerce, and how it helps merchants, partners, and the ecosystem.
Yes, welcome everyone. Another episode of Context. I'm here with Carl Rivera. You've here for 7 years.
7 years.
And I really hope I said your name right, because I don't think I've ever said it out loud.
You've never said my name out loud?
I don't think so. I don't think there's nobody, just like digital, it's like all Slack and shit.
No,
like
you
this is like,
you only ever called me the King of Sweden.
Right. Yes, like also it's a much better title than just going by full name. It's just, if I say King of Sweden and Shopify, everyone knows I'm talking about Carl, and I just get away with another day of having not to say your last name. But anyway, so that's a world first right here.
Yeah. Many first. First time you say my name, first time I'm on Context. This feels really awesome.
That's right. Not for a lack of trying, I might add.
No, that's true. The world has been conspiring against us ever coming together for this recording. I think this is like, we started trying to get a Context episode in right after Tictail was acquired by Shopify.
Yes. Yeah.
And we were going to do one about the marketplace and what would become Shop.
Right.
And then we've tried a few times, but finally it happened.
Yeah. At some point, the Canadian border that didn't allow you in or something like this. There was like lots of stories about why we couldn't Context.
Yes.
Man, that would have been a fun episode to have now in the archives about the marketplace.
Yeah, I know. It would have been a nice one. Maybe we'll do a retro at some point.
A retro.
I'm trying to invite myself again to the next episode now.
Are you sure? You're tempting fate every time you come across.
That's true.
So, Carl, you are Chief Design Officer.
Yeah. Were you about to say Chief Difficult Officer? I heard it coming.
I'm having great words.
Yeah.
I'm really having great words here.
I'm Chief Design Officer since about 6 months ago. I would say it's my third swing in the jungle gym here.
Yes.
I came in, did Shop, led Shop for the first 4 years, I think. Mm-hmm. Then led Merchant Services, 2.5 years.
Merchant Services.
And now just stepped into this new exciting chapter.
It's the good old, marketplace product management to fintech to chief design officer pipeline that's well documented.
The obvious career path.
Yes.
They talk about this when they give like career counseling in schools.
Absolutely, it's the first thing that usually comes up. Honestly.
Yeah, totally.
You're Swedish. That's your first suggestion.
Yeah. So maybe I can start by asking you a question. Why did you decide it was time to introduce this role? And the follow-up is, why did you think it was a good idea to put me into it?
So it's sort of a reverse, okay, so the second time you have Chief Design Officer role, right? Yeah. So Dave Wynand, my co-founder of Shopify, took that title initially. And to me, it was a very special role. So it was a retired jersey for a while, because it's... if you really look back at Shopify's history, like when we launched, like 2006, I know it's like this happens a lot on Context, where we sort of swing back, and now like we swing back in history, and we're actually moving by essentially 20 years.
Yeah,
crazy.
Right. Like 2 decades.
Like it's such a completely different digital world, especially the digital landscape, right? And so it was a time of where just we figured out how to make web apps, websites. It was just like there was the term software as a service wasn't around. The browsers were just like really, if it just became good, right? And so against this backdrop, Shopify launched, and we took a lot of care about it with design, right? Like honestly, the real differentiation of Shopify when we launched it was just that it's well designed.
Yeah.
It sounds like, not in the sense of like today, that like some things are better designed than others. It's actually like it was designed. Like it was not a database editor. It was actually like there was a story behind it of like we wanted you to come in and like there was sort of imbue some ambition and make sure that it's legible and that like one screen would take it next. Anyway, all these kind of things were like really we took really care about. And you know, Daniel has a special role. He also did some like some of the programming, but he in his role as designer, so he actually had veto rights over features, right? There's a lot of things we wanted to put in our product and then didn't not because like the code was there, but like we just couldn't know how to fit it into a part. Okay, so this is the backdrop. They also designed the offices, right? Like he like very carefully we made many offices as we are building. He was like obsessed with like happy accidents, he called them, just like being intentional, putting people through a space. And because he always had this opinion that no one can do, like people will not let themselves do work that underperforms their environment. Like just like we're very inspired by there. So you know, this is just sort of some sort of cornerstones of his work. Why now? Because I think we are kind of in the same age again, right? Like we are in this world where we understand like a new medium exists. We are not at the beginning of the internet anymore, but we are beginning of AI age. We don't know how it's going to be used, how it's going to fit in our life, what emotions, like can it imbue ambition, can it cause happy accidents? All this type of thinking is not really progress, not really engineering. And what happens early in platforms is like, and I'm an engineer myself, it's usually the engineers get the primacy because they have to like unlock all these things. And so a lot of the discussion is about what is now possible, what can we make possible, what code can we write, what architectures can we discover. But really, that's not the point of the new systems. The point is like how humans are going to end up using them, and how humans can like develop an intuition for them, how we can help them, and like so. I actually think that like the AI age, as much as it is about floating points and matrix multiplications, really is about like from a perspective of normal users, like people would just like use computers as tools, etc., as some kind of like lifelong vocation. From my perspective, it's like we fix computers. You know, they suddenly can start doing things after you just ask them, rather than having to like learn this entire thing that like that's someone ordained usually in some coastal city. And so all this encouraged me like to say, okay, well, this is a similar time. I need someone who can bring this kind of level of care and this sort of sense, not just of aesthetics, but also of like how things work, and just spend, you know, all day and the shower to think about like how to invent the user interfaces of the future, because that's actually where Shopify came from. So that you were sort of the obvious first call on this. So I'm not going to glaze you any further now. But like,
please go on.
this is about as far as I'm going to go. It's like, yeah, you're pretty good, so I called you. So there you go.
Can I tell you what it felt like being on the receiving end of that phone call?
What does it feel like?
I'll share a story with you, and I don't think I've told you this before, but I was sure I was getting fired.
That is not where I thought this would go. Okay,
so
go on.
So I was leading, merchant services. I was sitting in a payments review. It was like 20 people sharing the monthly business review of payments with me. I was very into that. And, I'm looking at the screen, so I'm not really paying attention to my phone or to Slack. But at some point I glance over to Slack and I see that Kate has DM'd me. And so I just open it to see what's up. And she's like, capital letters, Tobi's urgently trying to reach you. And I was like, okay, I wonder what is so urgent.
Oops.
But then I open up my phone and I see that I have 3 missed phone calls from you. And so I'm like, I have this review that's going on with all of these people that like, I am the person kind of owning the meeting. But I'm like, hey guys, you have to go on without me. I need to make a phone call. So I jump out of the meeting. I call you up. You know what the first thing you tell me is? You're like, Carl, I don't know how to tell you this.
Oh, great. Brilliant.
And at this point, I'm like, wow, this really cannot be good. But you're calling me from this like very bad connection. And you know, both you and I have accents that work against us sometimes when we're trying to share things. And you couple that with like a shitty cell phone connection.
And a poor start.
All right, exactly. So I tell you,
Wow.
Tobi, I think you're about to tell me something very important. And I don't want to miss a word of what you're about to say next. Can you please find a better phone connection and call me back? And we hang up. And you have these 3 minutes where I'm waiting for you to call me back. And the 3 minutes stretch, they feel like a very long period of time. And I'm like, interesting. I thought I was doing really great at Shopify. I wonder what's going on. Like, I wonder what I would do. Like, you have all of the thoughts running around in your head. And then you call me back up and you basically share the story that you just shared about entering into a new paradigm, about using design as a tool to reimagine the future, of making it something that we can all touch and hold and debate, and you know what my role could be in driving that change forward. and I don't know, it was like the craziest roller coaster of a day. Because I woke up thinking I was, you know, leading merchant services. I had a short stint where I was like, maybe I'm not at Shopify. And then I was like, oh, I'm going to go back to my roots and come back to where my career started, which was in design, and bring that into a next chapter at Shopify. And so I was like, just after that, I think I just left the office and I was like, I'm going to take a long walk and then I'm going to talk to Baba, my wife, and then figure out what's next.
It's amazing. Like, I mean, that's not even the first time we've had sort of a very consequential outcome of playing a phone tag game, right?
Know.
Like, that's pretty nutty.
It's how Tobi and how the Tictail acquisition ended up happening. So I'll do that story quickly because it's a fun story. We were in the process of selling Tictail. We had another offer that we were actually in the final stages of finalizing. I was literally on the phone with my lawyer when you called me. And you and I, at this point, this is 2018. We haven't talked in, I think, 6 months or something.
Yeah, we had one dinner at some point.
Yeah, exactly.
Partly because you were doing e-commerce software, I was doing e-commerce software.
And so we haven't talked in a long time. And I don't know why I thought it, but I thought you had butt dialed me. Like, I didn't think you were meaning to call me. So I text you back and I'm like, hey, Tobi, like...
Wasn't there even like a crazy angle? Because I don't even think you had my phone number in your phone, right? But there was like some... Did I hallucinate this? There was like some of us had like an app installed called Truecaller that kind of sort of
that revealed
name.
That might have been it. I don't remember this part of the story.
This might be hallucinated, but like anyway. So because I called you, you didn't answer. I was in New York.
Well, you were at the airport.
I was on my way to the airport. Yes. Yeah. I had breakfast with Jerry Levine from our board.
Yeah.
And we just had a board meeting the week before, and like I part of my board meeting is I always had like a list of like ambitions, like extension ambitions, partly because I needed an outlet. Shopify was not that big. I mean, it was not tiny either, but like, you know, one of my jobs is like, yes, like no, like the possibilities days of all the things we could be doing, but then like keep the company really focused on the thing that we ought to be doing right now. And so, anyway, so one of us is always like, I need another swing at this marketplace thing. And I was sharing my frustration, but I can't get there, although the timing is good and so on. Like, with the breakfast, Jeremy was like, is there anyone like, how about you just like purchase someone to like that you respect to go build this thing? And like, that's such a good idea. So I called you. Like randomly, I said like, hey, is this something that you're interested in? Didn't respond. I was on my way to the airport, and then like you called back, like, is this Tobi? Like,
yeah, exactly.
Like
I called you back, and you were like, hey, do you want to catch up? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. And you told me I'm at the airport. I'm at New York airport.
Yeah, I was in New York. Yeah.
And I was in my old Tictail office. I was in the Lower East Side of New York. And we literally just opened up Google Maps and we found the cafe that was right in the middle between New York Airport and Tictail Lower East Side, which would you imagine, is a very random cafe.
Yeah.
And I drove there and I came in. It was pouring down rain. It was like one of those like New York
It's
moments.
funny how much memory you have of this too. Like I remember this too. I ended up being consequential. Like I was a little bit there before you because I was already in a cab and could make my way there. I was reading like some kind of book and you walk in and look at me and it's like, man, you look like the furniture here. I'm like,
Yeah,
I
that's
don't even,
right.
I don't even know what that means, but it's hilarious.
Yeah, you looked like you had spent, like you came with the cafe, like you were just part of it. And
anyway, so
we said that
like we're definitely not talking about the topic we meant to be talking about, but
No.
this is really funny.
but the first question you asked me was, tell me what went wrong with Tictail. And I told you what went wrong with Tictail over the next, I think, 3 hours. We sat there for a long time. And at the end, you asked me one more question. And the question was, would you want to give it another go? And I told you, look, I would love to, and I would feel honored to do it at Shopify. But there's, unfortunately, I think gravity is working against us. Because we have the thing that's going to close next week. And you sort of said, okay, well, it was great to catch up. I don't know exactly how we left it, but then I think you guys worked nonstop over the weekend because on Monday, Bram flew over and he had produced the term sheet for that deal to happen.
Yeah, we moved as quickly as could. Yeah, because I couldn't. I mean, it would be probably for the narrative arc here. It would have been best to like say, okay, we'll do it or something like this. But like obviously, I need to actually go talk to some people and just like. Do like there's always a couple of things, especially I definitely have to call back Jeremy saying, okay, well.
No, I mean, I was shocked by the speed at which Shopify moved here. And I think that it reflected the ambition that I have felt be part of this company since then. Like, we had a coffee in the middle of like New Jersey on a Friday. And on Monday, the team had produced not like a number, a full term sheet.
Yeah. It's pretty cool. I mean, and think about how, just consequential this was for Shopify and for the, hundreds of millions of people using Shop, right?
Yeah.
Like now, and all wouldn't exist. So that started with basically us playing phone tag. You could have just simply not called back,
Yeah, exactly.
right? Like, and it wouldn't have happened there, right? Like, so it's crazy sometimes how very often is you can play this game of like, how few variables do you have to change to get to a totally different outcome? And this is one of those, like, man, there's a lot of variables, like there were a lot bearing to get here. Anyway, so a well-documented history of consequential phone calls. So design. You took this over six months ago.
Yeah.
You moved a lot of earth since. Tell me, now. I mean, I think you were initially immediately delighted with the invitation for this job, but I also told you, and the most important thing from my perspective for this job right now is to figure out what the job is. So, so what have you involved it into?
Yeah, I've stated 3 high-level goals for myself. Obviously, all of us that are here in different capacities are here in service of the mission, which is to make commerce better for everyone. I think the way that design can show up to make that happen is I want to create the place where the world's best designers choose to work. I want to create the place where they produce the best work of their careers, is the second goal. And the third goal is that I want us to be defining the future interaction patterns of AI, which is sort of this first point that you touched on of like, we are entering into a new paradigm. Everything is so ambiguous right now. And when you're heading into a future that feels like it's covered in the clouds, there's no better tool to imagine it than through design. Because design has this magical capability of bringing everyone in on the same version of the future. Mm-hmm. We can all go into a room and we can be 10 people that are all super smart and have incredible insights and talk about what's to come. But when we only use our words, we often leave that room having very divergent ideas of what we agreed to.
Yeah. Words are just like undefined pointers into random memory regions of everyone's brain, right? Like, so it's like how this assembles into some picture is like entirely like it would be if you ever get neural interfaces, we will all kind of the most fun activity that will be around the initial killer app of neural interfaces is someone saying a series of words and then everyone sharing a readout of how that arrived, because we will be like this is literally why we could never have nice things. It's like all problems derive from this thing. So anyway, so the design is the most beautiful way, beautiful in the sense of valuable way of collapsing the superposition of everyone's undefined behavior in their brains.
And I find that that's why it's so important. In the same way that it was important for Shopify when Shopify first started, and no one knew what a simple, good software looked like.
Right.
No, it hadn't even described it. So you could say it's easy to use.
Yeah.
Cool. What? And now we get to use design again to describe the future, but the future of AI in interfaces. Mm-hmm. And so that's like really exciting to go on that adventure. But if I then take those 3 goals of mine to say, hey, we're going to attract the world's best designer, produce the best work of their careers, defining the future interaction patterns of AI, I really think that breaks down across 3 different regions of work. And one is like, what's the talent, of course? And we have incredible talent here already. And setting them up in ways where they are allowed to work a little bit differently to address the challenges at hand. And then I think the layer on top of that is like, what are the work tools that we bring in? Because I really think that how we do work immediately defines the work that we put out. Mm-hmm. Like we cannot produce AI first interfaces if AI isn't in a very big way influencing how we create them.
Totally agree with that.
So I would go on record to say that I think that right now Shopify is, if not the furthest along, one of the most furthest along organizations in the world in how we use AI to accelerate and augment all of our day-to-day workflows. I think for all crafts, but specifically for design. I get some receipts on this because I've been sharing a lot of our internal stuff externally. Mm-hmm. Sorry. And it's just cool to see how people's minds explode when they consider just the adoption we have of using vibe coding tools like Cursor, how it's integrated with our design system Polaris, how we use state controls to create basically like much richer prototypes where you can put users in different states to understand how the interface shifts to them. Like we're so far along. And then comes the third part, the work that we actually put out. And you know, we're 6 months in, and I think we're starting to see the effects on some of the things that we've shifted. I mean, we were just in 2 days of GSD reviews, and there's a lot of like cool interfaces that are finding the right shape. But that's obviously going to be the always on part here.
Yeah, it's like I would love to make this more concrete because there was one thing that I think a lot about. Like because often, you know, when like I've had such a front row seat to the world of like what design has done to industry and then to behavior, that like I feel like just because the bifurcation of like these jobs, like you're either designer or maybe front-end designer, and sometimes that's part of design, sometimes that's part of engineering, and then we keep changing our mind, or then it's not a thing anymore at all, and then it's engineering and it's back end, you know, like these are really specialized things. And it's actually hard to see the overall picture. But like, so this is something everyone's already used to, but it's such an interesting example in this right from the AI age. So, of course, chatbots, we didn't, like that, I mean, that alone is like, GPT-3 was around, you could like get it to autocomplete text. Only when we said, okay, actually use it to, like in a format of chat, did people realize how to use it, because it became incredibly legible as a concept for people, approachable. And by the way, that's all design. Now, the thing that I find the most remarkable is streaming text. And this is just like, there's so much to say about this, because of course, it's a bit of a byproduct of how these models work. they predict one token as like a chunk of a word, right?
Yeah.
Like, and then so luckily very early, someone probably at OpenAI, maybe Microsoft, maybe one of these places, decided to like, as these are predicted, immediately show them on the screen.
Yeah.
And then probably thought it's okay, it was a good experience, maybe. It's not usually, like no other chat is like with humans. They type out the entire thing and then send it over.
Yeah.
So this is actually a differentiation. There's so much we put in top of this because it ended up being super valuable. It's actually now aesthetically and design and from an approachability perspective, you're talking with an AI and streamed.
Yeah.
And it's a real differentiation. It's like we would never have designed this in a central committee or so, that with differentiation between humans and sending us a message and machines sending us a message is that we can sort of see it appear.
Yeah.
But it's actually genius and it's actually intuitive. And, then the whole work started off, okay, well, it's like chunks, but that looks bad. So there's like all these incredible algorithms that now exist that like stream out word by word, and there's like catch-up mechanics if the words become longer because it's like differentiating lengths and so on. And all this just like makes it look effortless and approachable and fine, and like it communicates and the latency is good. And all of that is design. Yeah. That is it. It's once all of this fits together perfectly. It's a designed interaction instead of a aesthetical picture that some people like sometimes reduce the concept of design to.
Yeah, totally. I have this view that we're in this period where all lines are blurring, and it involves how we do work. So designers need to think more and behave more like engineers, and can also do more engineering-like work. And we have engineers and product leaders that can actually produce a lot of good design. And I think this is also then true for interfaces. Actually, like the lines will be blurring, where the first version of the interaction patterns of AI was that there was a chat box. And that in itself was a genius design, and it sat on the side, or it was the entire interface, and you go back and forth. And what I hope we will get to is a world where we don't have to choose a modality so much upfront, where the way that you can move between imperative and declarative interfaces, chat and point and click, voice. You can shift in and out of them in a very, very fluid way. And I think this is sort of speaking to this point that you're raising, where like interface should feel fluid and alive, and you shouldn't feel like you're so stuck that you have to know upfront exactly how you want to be achieving the task that you're going out to achieve. You should be allowed to change your mind and try different ways of approaching it and holding it.
Completely agree. And I also like just, again, because I think what we will actually achieve is it's actually almost a diminishment of the sort of, I mean, this is sort of big words, the modality of computers. Right now, you like to work, you sit down at a desk, or obviously you can also take out your phone. But like, I think like working with computers will become just much more of an ambient thing. I actually think that in the future, when you watch movies from these periods of time, and there's scenes of just seeing a lot of screens and a lot of sort of this sort of structured office environment. I think that actually will date the movies somewhat. I think it'll just be exactly what you're saying. Like you might chat. AR, these kind of things are actually going to be part of it, but it's not as. The point is, it's not important that AR is a part of it. It's just like all of the above. Because again, computers are actually able to meet us where we are, because the difference between 4 years ago and today is that we like computers can reason about like they have a word model, like a model of the world the way we think about it, and so again, that is one of the consequence of of this means that computers become an entirely different thing. And so my point earlier about the streaming that I really wanted to make is that one of the things I've had a very privileged front row seat to is that the world is vastly more path dependent than people think. And a great idea early when a new platform comes out is going to be encoded in the firmament in a way that is just like incredibly, like it's so deep down that no one actually believes there could have been another way, but it really just was someone's choice at some point. And sometimes, frankly, distressingly often that choice was made in a company like ours, because we just kind of were the first, like, hey, we want to do this thing. This just became possible based on my entire life experience and as a designer, as an engineer, what's my first step of how I would bring this to market or how I would put the prototype up in front of my colleagues. The decision you made probably in milliseconds there, although assisted by all of your experience and background, may well end up being with humanity forever. And just
totally
outlive all of us in a way that says, and this is good and bad. I mean, frankly, I always joke that I think cookie banners are going to outlive us all. And I think people are going to be on spaceships to Alpha Centauri and will have to still dismiss cookie banners on websites, right? Sometimes the path dependence goes the wrong way. So I think, being extremely deliberate and having exactly the right set of people around you in the room, great designers, great engineers, and when we want to do new things is really valuable for us and everyone else as well.
Which plays perfectly into this point. We're defining the future interaction patterns of AI, not of Shopify, of how the world will experience this new technology paradigm. And I love the point you're raising.
And just sorry to interrupt, but it's if you don't think this is if you think this is hyperbole, just look at Shopify itself. It's the sign up page with 3 options there at different price points. It is we call it software as a service. The admin interfaces have sometimes tabs, sometimes sidebars. The entire retail industry of planet Earth now talks about products that have variants. I made that up. I did not know enough about the retail industry to know that those things are called SKUs with attributes. Therefore, we now all have variants and options everywhere. So it's just that's the retail industry will forever use my be built on top of my temporary nomenclature confusion, and that's funny in a way. But also tells me how serious I have to take these responsibilities that we are having here. So
absolutely, one of the stats that keep blowing me away that I repeat in when I interview external people, and even though I know the stats for a year or more, Shopify is over 10% of US commerce.
It's that's a lot.
That's insane.
Yes,
it's just incredible. So obviously, the footprint we have and the responsibility.
It gets crazier because it's Shopify allegedly is. I mean, this is very hard to get this with real numbers, but I've heard now that it's a third of the web's traffic. The actual non-bot, human created open web traffic. So that is nuts, right? So
it's absolutely wild.
So
obviously we have a platform where things that we put into the world don't just impact Shopify and the millions of large size of merchants that use it, but it ends up becoming standards. It ends up carrying weight for how we interface with computers and reason about software. And I really like one of the things that you said earlier that is sort of what I'm trying to hold on to is the right form factor of AI will be when we stop thinking so much about AI. It's just there. It's just how computers work. It's not a mode you go into. It's not a setting you turn on. It's just so native to the interfaces and how they show up in front of us that it's no longer there.
And this is due to, obviously modalities. You can call it, or you can talk to it, or you can, just these kind of things. But it's actually, there's an even bigger point about the amount of work it can do without you needing to interact with it, right? Like this is what you mentioned earlier, where our belief here is that we are going from you going into like something like an admin interface and changing a million different switches to accomplish your strategy. You increasingly will be able to tell us, what is your strategy? Like, how would you like to merchandise? What is your objective function here? Like, are you then, instead of adding 15 new products, you tell us that you're gonna release the fall edition of your product catalog. Now, obviously, you're going to tell us about the products. You also give us the images, but we might collaborate on making the images the best possible ones. And and maybe you allow us to do this automatically, and then Shopify just keeps doing this while and maybe everyone sees a slightly different version of the images eventually, and so on, so on, so on. Shopify becomes will go from tool to team member to your entire department that's working. Like there's going to be a data center worth of an e-commerce department working on behalf of all the millions of Shopify stores.
Exactly.
And that's an incredible transition that requires a reinvention of how software works from a fundamental level.
And ultimately, it will shift the role of the merchant from being an administrator of sorts to being an editor of sorts. Right? You're coming in, all of the actions are there for you, curated for you, based on declarative settings that you've announced at some part of your journey. You're looking to grow, you're looking to expand internationally, you're looking to do different things. And you then you're a curator of strategies that are presented to you and that the software can go to work on your behalf.
Yeah. I'm extremely excited about this. Like I can't wait for the day where you can obviously Shopify already is like, I think Sidekick is incredible already. It's also not exactly what we're talking about. Sidekick is sort of our current co-pilot inside of Shopify, but it's like clearly the most advanced in sort of business software. Like I think we are basically at cursor level of utility there. It's incredible how well it's used. It's incredible what it can do. I can't wait for the day where you can just have conversations about it, about what you don't like. It's like, what are you disappointed with in your shop? It's like maybe this sort of plays specifically to my particular way of thinking about, but I'm like, I want to tell Sidekick that I'm kind of disappointed with the product photography or with just like with like that I haven't gotten further in my ambition to like just expand globally or and then just like collaborate on this. Yeah. That will feel very different and very futuristic from our perspective today.
Yeah.
But again, it only feels sort of cyberpunk if it's a stretch. It will feel incredibly obvious and normal if design plays its role.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
Design is the thing that makes a difference between it feeling like tacked on and feeling extremely approachable, natural, and colloquial.
What's wonderful with that example is that it plays back to your story of how the old office environment will feel kind of dated. Because when I think about a person having that conversation, it's not one where you go into your office and you sit down and you start to have that conversation.
Exactly.
It's something you're on the bus and you're like, have 20 minutes and you're thinking about like this company that you're building and this thing you're trying to achieve. And you're like, I just want a friend to kind of talk to in a way. And you can start kind of like sharing your ideas and your visions and your complaints. And the software can be there with you and actually expand its capabilities well beyond what can fit into the screen of a phone, to allow you to really think about your business and act on your business no matter the context you're currently in.
I completely agree. It's again, and why is this even important? Like I do think obviously people spill a lot of ink right now on the changing nature of like work in the future, and any technology is just another word for progress, and it's any progress has changed the makeup of the markets, the behavior, the possibility spaces, and so on. And so there is some lack of this. I do think there's, the way employment today is impacted at the very least, like just like the traditional cubicle farm is probably going to be impacted here. I think there's a lot to potentially like about that. I think we will see significantly more primacy to smaller smaller, more specialized companies created by people who no longer go all day to a cubicle. I think entrepreneurship is such a big part of the solution here.
Yeah.
And having significantly more, like millions and millions of additional people who have visions and have interests in, and actually are sitting on really, really valuable ideas for and desires to build up something, giving them the ability to just do this in a very natural way without actually having to time travel back and learning programming or whatever, or getting a marketing degree or any of these kind of things. Just by conversation, by maybe something like Sidekick, an advanced version of Sidekick, he's prompting you saying, hey, share your vision. Can I ask you some pointed question, and anything that comes to mind, just let me know, and actually develop, concretize something that is the thing you want to do.
Yeah.
Perfectly non-judgmental, perfectly helpful, and incredibly knowledgeable, just for the purpose of having this on background, so that every other thing that you do with your Shopify business is now in keeping this vision that you developed together or you shared. Man, that is how I think almost everyone who listens to this, who has been part of building something important, it could be like a thing like a band or maybe a startup, recognize this is exactly how this felt like.
Yeah.
You sort of brainstormed about ideas, you brainstormed just like in that New Jersey cafe that we sat in about what could be built.
Yeah.
And so, more people experiencing this, because those are the load-bearing parts of building something, and more people building things, which then adds more amazing products, which increases progress and so on and so on. So it's a virtuous cycle, and I think Shopify can just do so much here.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. One of the frameworks that I would love to get your input on that I use in design right now, but I don't know if you agree to, is that I'm basically working on this assumption that we should work on the very long term and the very short term and cut out everything in the middle. And this instinct I have is that it's actually kind of easy to imagine the future when it's very far out, in the way that you and I are right now.
Yeah.
You can kind of...
I totally agree.
Nail that.
Yeah.
And it's also fairly easy to have very good ideas of what the right choices are for the next month or so. It turns out it's extremely difficult to know what the world is going to look like 6 months from now or a year from now.
Totally.
And for some reason, it's actually kind of the time period that most, I think, product and design work has happened on for a very long time, where we try to set roadmaps that are 6 months out or a year out. But it's the muddiest territory. But if we can push ourselves to say, hey, we have a vision of where this thing is going to end up. And we're going to take that vision and we're going to articulate it in some way that feels exciting and inspired. And then we're going to look at it and we're going to say, well, what's the thing that we could take out of this and put to work today? That is the motion that we should be working in.
I completely agree. I'm a big fan of James Carr's finite and infinite games. Yeah. And I think it's really gets at this very thing. It's that it's fun to define winnable games that have clear goals, and then they are accomplished and we won the game with this particular instantiation. Every game of tennis is like this and so on. There's someone keeps score, there's clear winner and so on. We have the infinite games, which are infinite games that are much more nebulous. They are they don't usually have a goal. They usually have I think interestingly, machine learning people would recognize this as a loss function, where it's it's sometimes an aesthetic or sometimes just a desire for getting somewhere. It's you want to get to horizon, not because to reach the horizon. Yeah. You want to your vision is to reach the horizon so that you can gain more vision. You can look up past it. And so infinite games are really under-documented, underappreciated, and under-discussed in company building and product building. And I think what working on the long term is it actually firms up the vision that then you can go to. These things are not the goal. They have a horizon you want to get to, so that to gain more vision. And what they do is they actually inspire us to kind of define a winnable game to approximate them, because one way to know if your next step is a good one is like, well, does it take me closer to this thing that's over there? Am I approximating a horizon? Now, sometimes you find you take a path that takes you sort of closer there, but then it bends and you can't quite reach this.
Yeah.
You're like you're like local maxima, whatever. Like you pick your metaphor, and then you have to backtrack. But that's also good, and that's not an issue. So I'm a big fan of this. I think sometimes we want to use design to take something that everyone's like that's there and it's important, and we just want to like over invest in design.
Yeah.
There's a delight that comes from using a thing where people just went kind of way too far, right? Like, and there's Apple has historically been good at this, like digital aisle, which I think is one of those great examples. Like there was a hole in the screen because we need to put cameras somewhere. Some designers went like, what if we actually just play with that idea,
exactly,
right? And it's like amazing what they did. Shopify does this with its editions. It's fundamentally a changelog, and we're just going way too far, very deliberately. And most of the short-term interaction, but like the long-term, what could this look like, and constantly updating them to create a new, are we approximating getting somewhere is incredibly valuable as well.
And it's interesting, I actually take the same model and apply it in how I think we should do the day-to-day work for design. So a perhaps controversial opinion is that I think that Shopify should not peanut butter its efforts around design. I think we should have a very clear view of what are the hot paths for merchants, and we should double down on making them be 10 out of 10 experiences. And then I think a lot of our experiences can be vibe coded 7 out of 10 things that use good component systems, are usable, but that you don't really even need to have a designer involved in them.
Yeah. Well, it's just, the technology that makes that tractable is great design systems.
Exactly.
So you overdo the design system so that you can then move fast. Like move fast on with great infrastructure is something we do in engineering, and it turns out it works just as well in design.
That's exactly it. So you basically end up with two modalities of work. One is to say, hey, we're going to strengthen the foundation and have a really fantastic design system, because if you want great outputs from AI, you have to have a really good input. Mm-hmm. And that will enable anyone to do good design. And then we're going to break the design system and allow ourselves, give ourselves permission to paint outside of the lines for some of these experiences where you want the user to not just come away with a sense of like, well, this did a good thing for me. You should come away with the appreciation that this is quality premium software. Mm-hmm. Like, this is not something I could go out and vibe code on myself over the weekend.
Yeah, definitely not.
Because increasingly, right, that's the bar we come up against. Like, we have network effects and regulations and other things that allow us to differentiate. But ultimately, for some of the utilities that we offer, you will be able to vibe code those for yourself, not using Shopify, in a short period of time. And so then the question is, can we bring that quality of software to a level where it's actually worth paying for? Like, it's actually worth choosing to not build it for yourself using some vibe code tool. Mm-hmm. Like, the experience of how it felt, how thoughtfully crafted this was, just doesn't make it worth the extra effort to go out and do it through some other interface.
Yes, and I think this gets into the, like, what does a amazing design actually do, right?
Yeah.
To the users, right? Like, this is it. Like, it gets really. I think a lot about like these like emotional states there. Like what, like, again, we're making software for entrepreneurs, right? Like, and that's a daunting task for people, especially the first time you do it. It's you're clearly scared of failure. You're very likely confused because there's so much to learn. Like, you have to get no matter what you've done before, this will test you. So, like, I think what like great design, very careful created experiences can do is it can just like dial down the temperature on all these like negative emotions, like making something like when you want to do a thing and you think this should work a certain way. That's your first guess. And not only is that exactly than how it works. You find exactly the right option at the exactly right place. It turns out that as you're using it, you realize, wow, I didn't even think of certain things, but like it's very clear how to accomplish those, and I could actually do an even better job here based on like, man, you're proud of yourself. Like this is the exact fuel that keeps you going. That just came from like spending, a lot of time thinking in some, it's some tech company about a thing that just like we could have also just like sort of peanut buttered there.
Exactly.
But like sometimes it gets so narrow on your motivational battery for building this business that the only thing that made you go past the low point, the next part of a roller coaster that you're gonna hit, is the fact that you remember like, well, I got this far, no problem, and so that is the role our software plays in some businesses, and the way how like I think Shopify cannot just like be an accessory to the journey you've committed yourself on, but actually can be push you from behind to be even more successful, or actually even truly succeed on something that otherwise maybe you would have given up on. And I think that's something like a responsibility we're taking so incredibly seriously, and something that's so it's at the end of the day, this is design.
Yes. What a wonderfully stated ambition that is, right? To go from interfaces that informs to interfaces that inspire. And that invites you to do more than what the utility set out to achieve. It's a really wonderful way to think about it. And perhaps that could perhaps be where we start to run off. But one word that I hold on to with Shopify, that's been the thing that kept me here, that keeps me here, that will continue to keep me here, that I think unites all of us, it's ambition. And I think, when I started here, one of the things you told me was that I want Shopify to have the most care in the world. And I need to care the most because no one can care more than I do. And I think
no one can care more than the person they report to.
Exactly.
It's like,
And I think I think another really important word is ambition. And they go kind of hand in hand. But like now is the time for us to just expand how much ambition we allow ourselves to have. Because there's no speed limit, there's no limitation to what we can create. And we get to reimagine not just Shopify, but like how internet works, how commerce works, how software behaves. It's
And I care. So again, I think one of my very firmest beliefs about software is that every user of any piece of software can intuitively tell how much the people who created the software gave a shit about it. It's just like you just know. Like, and it's so I really think this care is extremely important. On ambition, like I think ambition can have a bad rep because there's two types of ambitions, and people some like roll them together. There's zero-sum ambition and positive-sum ambition, and they shouldn't even have the same term because the fundamental outcomes for like are just incredibly different. Because zero-sum ambition is I want more for myself, right? Like I want the entire pie.
Yes.
And this is like whenever you see criticism of companies and individuals, it's usually because this is the thing. There is also greediness in the positive sum. It's actually getting to this next destination that we chose on the infinite game quicker.
Yeah.
It's actually speed running the tech tree for humanity. It's like just elevating, like giving more people the ability to contribute gainfully to the wonderful markets we have created and the internet and the product verse and all these kind of things. Like it's so I'm a sticker for this. I want Shopify to be the most positive, some ambitious company. That because we want we want to be ambitious on behalf, not of Shopify itself. Shopify will do fine with being part of this. So there's nothing else that we need to do. It's more like we want ambitious for the entirety of people who trust Shopify to be part of something, or even for people who don't use Shopify. Again, like there's a lot of people who have products that they deeply care about that exists partly because someone did not stop at some point because they ended up succeeding on something they set out to be and didn't feel stupid for not knowing how to now change the tax rate after the government changed the tax rate, right? I know it's a ridiculous example, but both are like, you can imagine, like, you know, holy shit, like there's tariffs suddenly in the world. Now I have to enable tariffs. Oh, Shopify did it for me.
Yeah.
Like, that's cool. You know, like that still means you have to pay tariffs, but at least it softened the blow somewhat. Maybe that was enough, right? So,
Awesome.
I think that's a good place to end. I think, like, I do feel like one thing we should really try to push is this idea that design is a vantage point or to a greater ambition that actually engineering and product also contribute to, which is that the entire goddamn thing works super well because everyone gave a shit.
Yeah.
It's not even there's zero-sum design, which is like at some point just is like, does the screen look nice on the screenshot?
Yeah.
And there's positive sum design, which is like through the power of design,
Yes.
can be reach heights of quality that are like otherwise unreachable.
Yes.
And so that's the job.
Yeah, that's the job, man. I'm here for it.
Sweet.
It's what I signed up for.
Awesome.
Cool. To the future.
Let's go.